This House is now in Standing Finance Committee. Honourable Member for St. George North.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the last day and a half or so, we've been hearing from the Ministry of Transport and Works. Specifically, we heard about the plans or the progress towards the mass transit. And among those plans, we should be anticipating some progress as it relates to routing and so of the Transport Board. I'm sure that's what I was hearing yesterday, some improvements. One could easily imagine that to be a response or something to look forward to when it relates to new roads, or not new roads, new routes. For instance, for St. George North, and I know it was raised in a Parish Speaks 2 Junes ago, a request was made for a bus to go through the link road that leads to Groves Terrace. And that has not been followed through on up to now in terms of an assessment. But the question that I would have outside of those new routes to be established and the assessments that need to be made is how does one decide when a bus route is no longer viable, particularly when there are residents that utilize the route and are demanding the route. And specifically, I refer to the Dash Valley bus that during a by-election, its route was expanded to allow that Dash Valley bus to turn around at the Glebe Market. And since then, notwithstanding the fact that the route is utilized, it has been, the route has been shortened again so that the residents of Constant and the area between Dash Valley and the Glebe Market again are without the public transport to facilitate them. So my question is, how does one determine when a route is no longer viable? How is a route stopped?
Thank you, Honourable Member. I'm going to ask the CEO of the Transport Board to respond to your question. Suffice to say that we are in the process of rationalizing a number of the routes, taking into account that some of the routes more than others are more frequently used. Also the demands that have been being placed on the Transport Board as new developments have actually been taking place across the country. I know that we've been in discussions with the Senior Minister responsible for infrastructure in relation to specifically the portfolio of planning, because it is important for us as we plan out the routes across the country that we understand and appreciate exactly where development is taking place. But to your specific question regarding your constituency, and that particular route, I will ask Mr. Wharton perhaps to just indicate why it has been stopped. And I don't want to anticipate what he's going to say, but I'm sure it is going to relate to the quantum of buses that we have had available to us in recent times. But Mr. Wharton, please.
Thank you, DPM. Fabian Wharton, CEO, Transport Board, and good afternoon to everyone. I'll begin by saying, one, the transport system is one where we have a competitive environment. We have an environment where there is route taxis and there are also Transport Board buses on the same route. So what happens is that sometimes, and this is not in particular to Dash Valley, this is just a general overview. Sometimes what happens, we have seen it on other routes, where we position buses on those routes and the load factors are basically not there at all. But then what happens is that we would get information coming back to us, which is saying that, you know, there are a set of persons who travel at a particular time, a particular day in terms of pensioners especially, because they don't get the same concessions that they would get on the transport board bus on the private ZRs. So then we made what we call not really a full route service, but then we put in special services in those times. As it relates to Dash Valley, from the time I came, I remember that route being one that was heavily serviced by private PSVs. And I know that at the time, the transport board was not providing that service. You are correct, the service was then extended and trialed, and at that time we were operating at like 90, 80 in terms of bus availability. And we trialed the route, we extended it across. But also from the numbers that I have seen for that, even with the extensioning, did not point to a significant increase. So we were discussing this, and this also applies to, I was speaking to the member who represents Eden Lodge. It also applies to that as well, because we are also seeing now a pocket where, in particular in Dash Valley, and also in Eden Lodge, where persons want to move at a particular time. The challenge, though, is that at the moment, we certainly do not have the resources. We are spread really thin. So you have to make some very hard decisions. It may not be the answer that you would want to hear, but it's the truth. We then have to make some hard decisions as it relates to the available resources that we have to use. And what I was saying yesterday to the member, I can't remember the constituency name, as it relates to Eden Lodge in particular too, which would also apply for Dash Valley. Maybe when we are relooking, no, we don't have to wait till we get additional buses. But maybe now when we are relooking places like, we relook College Savannah, maybe we look how the Sergeant Streets are routing and those kind of things, and watch and see how many come in on the same corridor, and then see if we can make those little adjustments, given that you are constrained in resources. And same thing over the other side. We maybe bring us one of the services that are coming up through the hill, Warrens, Jackson, whatever, and roll it through Eden Lodge instead, as opposed to trying to do it all one. It's a case where we're gonna have to get a little creative in order to meet the needs of the people in the interim, given what we are faced with. So I do understand the concern. I do understand what transpired, but that is where we are at the moment.
Just to follow up to say that I'm not looking for a particular answer. I'm looking for truth. And in these things, we normally look for consistency, because certainly there was never an indication that the route was a trail. During, and as the representative for that area, I'm careful, very careful myself about being aligned with any political antics, because it was during an election time and the route was introduced within days, and then the route was taken off or reduced. It was introduced and then it was reduced without notice and without explanation. So I am hearing from Chairman, I'm hearing from the Transport Board that the residents in the constant area should satisfy themselves with a result, a response that the resources of the Transport Board no longer facilitates them getting access to public transport.
Chair, I would like to say that this matter, to draw a parallel between an election period and this matter was raised as far back as 2019 when I first came to the board. And I remember it well because it was also raised with some other matters. And what I would say is the board does not make decisions based on whether it's election season or not. The board has to make its decisions strictly based on, one, the resources that it has available to it and the utilization of those resources. It might be coincidental, and then it might be, people may draw it as an inference. But the reality of the situation is that you have to manage the resources that you have. and as a board, look for creative ways to satisfy the request and the demand, not only for rural Barbados, but for everybody in Barbados who wants to travel. We would have also used TAP there at some point in time as well. And as I was saying, those CM TAP operators also have some challenges, and we have seen a decline in the amount of available operators. And so it is a give and take reality of the situation. We do have the Sergeant Street and stuff that may come up there, but I do get the concerns, and I do empathize with the persons in that community and all other communities where we are unable to provide the services as we would like. But we would aim, hopefully, to do better as we get the additional resources that are coming in May and the other ones that are supposed to be coming in December, which goes to 120. By that time, we should have expanded the TAP, and hopefully these things will be a thing of the past. And that is our intention, our goal in 2026.
Mr. Chairman, if you'll allow me, I'll move on, but not without saying that I have some knowledge of the TAP workers, to some relationship with the TAP workers, and I'm aware that they themselves would have proposed a route that would pass through Market Hill and the same constant area on through Dash Valley and onto Oistins. So they themselves, because they're coming up short, some of them on routes, have been proposing routes that they can service as well. So you're hearing the Transport Board to say as well that they will revisit it, and hopefully with the additional information that may have been available to them in another place, they will see it fit to prioritize the resumption of the service through the constant area. I can move on to a second question, and it shouldn't surprise you that, like many of my colleagues, I would wish to raise the prioritization of road infrastructure being done in the St. George North area. And this is now 3 years that the residents in Sweet Vale would have anticipating roads being done, a road being done. It was committed to them in June 2022 specifically that it would be next on a list after the Scotland District issue in the particular area of the East Coast Road was resolved. And then that is one that has been long in coming. It was determined too that the Lower Estate Road, which is a major artery, that road should be completed as well. And that one was only on the schedule for the last year to year and a half. And Tate Hill Thorpe's Cottage. Now, the interesting thing about Tate Hill Thorpe's Cottage is that road, the residents got excited thinking the road was going to be done, and a minor link to that road was done instead in September last year, and commitment was made that the error having been made, that they will look to revisit it. I think that they spoke about designing some designs that had to be done. Of course, I'm not the technical person, so I can't suggest that a mill and pave will be good for that road and not design and build, as they may call it. So I would wish if the Ministry of Transport and Works could speak specifically to those areas that were raised, Sweetville, Lower Estate, and Tate Hill Thorpe's Cottage, and then relating to the road infrastructure again. Part 2 of that will be to speak to Newberry and St. Jude's and St. Helens specifically as it relates to road safety. In the case of St. Helens, the road was cleared on the site to facilitate a sidewalk at least 8 years ago. At least, it could be at least 10. And that still has not been done to facilitate the traffic, the pedestrian traffic, mainly by our children on mornings and evenings going to and from school. And then a similar situation exists in Newberry, to the Newberry St. Jude's Road.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I will take the ones that I'm most familiar with and then allow the Chief Technical Officer to just expand on a few of them as well, because obviously he has been with the ministry a bit longer than I have, and so I know that some of these matters would have been before him for a while and certainly before the ministry. I would have indicated, certainly in the opening, that MTW is trying to do things a little bit differently this time around. And there are a lot of roads that have been on the works program, as well as roundabouts that have been on the roads program for a long time, and bridges. And we have been trying to systematically address them because we appreciate that there's a level of frustration taking place in the country as a result of us not getting to them in a timely manner. That said, we were able to resurrect the Groves roundabout, which, as you know, is pretty near to the Sweetville area. And in so doing, we are now in a position to extend the tender for the roundabout to include the Sweetvale Road. That will allow us to, in a sense, complete that area. And I don't know why it was left out initially. I suspect it may have been under a separate program, but we have recognized that obviously the two are very, interconnected, and the team that is dealing with the tendering has determined that they will now include the Sweetvale area into the tender documents for the Groves roundabout. I believe that some boundary surveys had to be done, and those have been completed by MTW and shared with the Ministry of Housing so that the appropriate paper can come in relation to the acquisitions that are necessary for that. But we are definitely including it going forward because it has been really too long overdue in terms of the length of time that it has stayed within the ministry. As it relates to Lower Estate is one of those roads like Lodge Hill that was to be included under the Mill and Plave last year. Again, and it was a priority road, but as with all roads that we may place to, out of the concerns that have been expressed, they must be assessed. And I'm going to keep reiterating this until hopefully all of you in this space and all those listening understand that the construction and reconstruction of roads first requires an assessment so that we understand the conditions of the soils that we are working with and the full extent of the works that are before us. It is no different from building a house or constructing any other thing. You must assess first before you make a determination on costs, on the priorities, what aesthetics you're going to use to make it look appealing. And road construction is absolutely no different. So Lower Estate was taken out of the Mill and Pave last year, primarily because the road required the Barbados Water Authority to undergo mains replacement along that stretch. And as I would have stated before, a lot of these roads that we're doing, while it may appear as though it's just a strict mill and pave because they may have a few potholes, the truth of the matter is that we would be doing the country an injustice if we simply just milled and paved these roads without taking the time to work through with the utilities whether upgrades can also be made on the road at the same time, because it alleviates the concerns that all of us have as to the digging back up of roads when a newly paved road has been completed. And we are trying to minimize those instances where that occurs. And therefore, we are just awaiting the schedule from Barbados Water Authority as to when they can come into that area and actually start to address it. But I believe they have already assessed, and it's really just a matter of scheduling in terms of making a determination as to when. But to assure you that just as Lodge Road is a priority and some of the others, it now has to be assessed and then a determination made as to whether we can then mill and pave once the waterworks have gone in, or whether we need to do any further reconstruction or if there are drainage issues in that area. I will ask CTO to address the others, the Tate Hill, Thorpe's Cottage, and the others that you have raised as well.
Good afternoon, Dave Scantlebury, Chief Technical Officer at MTW. In connection, let me speak first about Sweetvale. Sweetvale Road has been one that we've had our eye on for quite a bit. Last year, it was slated to be done. However, when we looked at it again, we recognized that it needed a little more than just a mill and pave. It was placed under the compliant program. However, compliant has taken a little longer than we would have hoped to get into the area to do that type of work. And there are other Scotland District roads which are of a higher priority. So what we are looking to do this year is to put it into CAF for us to do. Obviously, given that it needs full redesign, that's something that's going to take some time. I estimate it's going to take about 18 months from now to actually get that work done. So you will understand. It's going to take, I would say, about 12 months in terms of the planning and 6 months in construction. The planning stage will include the land surveying, boundary surveys, design, cadastral works, sorry, not cadastral, any type of subsurface or geotechnical work that needs to be done, and then we will be able to get into, as well as procurement of contractors, and then we'll be able to get into the work. So it's going to take a little time, but rest assured that that is one of our priorities. The second, what I'd like to know, Tarps Cottage. Give me a second. Okay. Tarps Cottage is one to be done under our paving unit. Sorry, give you wrong information. It was supposed to be done under our paving unit, but no, it has to be outsourced because they aren't able to do it to the extent that it needs to be done. What are the other roads, please?
The other roads are Newbury to St. Jude's and St. Helens stretch, and that is primarily from a point of view of safety and not just potholes. We appreciated the fact that that road on St. Helens was actually done under the mill and pave, but the side roads remain undone, the sidewalks.
Okay. I will let Lorian Graham, Deputy Chief, speak to that one.
Lorian Graham, Deputy Chief for Designs. The section of road from, I think it's Locust Hall to Cuthbert Moore, that road was to be fully redesigned under a previous IDB road rehabilitation project. And for that reason, the sidewalk was not done separately. It was to be done as part of a complete road rebuild with drainage work associated, especially in that area just past the little church, and also to prevent all that water from sheeting down the road to Locust Hall. So it was supposed to be part of a wider project. During the progress of that project, the Highway 3 work was truncated at the roundabout at Lower Estate. And so all of that associated work going further east was not done. Subsequent to that, you spoke of the mill and pave. The mill and pave project did not undertake any associated work such as sidewalks. So once again, unfortunately, that sidewalk link was not taken up. What we will have to do in this case then is understanding that both the road safety work and the drainage work have to take place. We will have to set that up as a separate project and ensure that the work is completed. I know that in the interim, because it's not sealed, it does get bushy and a bit slippery for the students that have to walk. So we have to ensure that the area is clear until we get the hard surface put in place to make it all weather and safe. Does that answer your question?
It answers up to a point, and I think that my concern, which should be the concern of all of us, feeds into the concern raised by the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central. Because when it comes to safety issues, that is where priority in our view should go. Because you, from your technical point of view, you will be looking at the different projects under which these things should be prioritized. We're just seeing the safety element that needs to be addressed. However, it needs to be addressed, so we hope that priority will come there, particularly the Cuthbert-Moore Locust Hall, or what I call the St. Helens stretch. When the rain falls, there is no distinction between the road and the sidewalk. So for children walking, people walking generally, it becomes very, very treacherous on that stretch. Chair,
Okay.
I have one. You were coming back in? I have one final question though, and I won't belabor the point on the Sweetvale Road and the 18-month plan. I still don't understand, outside of all the technical jargon, why it should take 12 months before works can begin on that road. I don't think that was satisfactorily addressed, but I would wish at some point in time, if we could get the MTW to commit to having some discussions with the communities directly to explain these things to them, especially since, as I said, it was a specific commitment since June 2022. But the final thing that I would have wish to raise, and I think that it was touched on by another honourable member yesterday, relates to mirrors specifically. There are a number of areas that have been identified for mirrors, and I take it that an assessment has to be done to determine if mirrors and how they're positioned and whatever. But there are also some areas where there were mirrors and where we've been trying for some time to have the mirrors replaced because they're now broken and so on. And we can never hear from MTW that there are mirrors available to be reinstalled in those places. So on the one hand, we hear about assessments that have to be done and so on for new placements, but for where there are existing mirrors that have been broken from accidents or whatever other circumstances, the replacement is an issue because MTW does not seem to stock mirrors. The thing that they say to residents and to constituency offices like mine is that you can purchase it and bring it, and they will put it on a pole and erect it for you, and that is the solution. So I would like to have a response to how we stop for these things.
Honourable Member, I just want to state categorically that that is not an official position of the ministry, certainly not of the minister. And it is unfortunate if the communication between your office and MTW has in any way led you to believe that if you buy it, that we would in any way install it. That should never be the case. The truth is that there are challenges in terms of identifying the broken infrastructure, and I'm not going to say that signage is any different from mirrors or sidewalks or any other aspects of the ministry. We had the signage audit, for instance, that was done recently, where we sent out auditors to be able to assess broken infrastructure, look at which signs were missing. That is what has led us to the point where we can now do a signage project in this coming financial year. Similarly, the broken infrastructure in terms of mirrors perhaps needs a similar audit. We would hope that the depots would have been in a position to identify where a mirror existed and then be in a position to say to the senior techs, this is what is required. That system doesn't always work as well as we would like it to. What I encourage people to do, however, is to use the technology that we have by way of a location pin on the phone, and you can submit through the ministry's website any concerns regarding broken infrastructure. We were hoping to have a Fix It Barbados app, which would be utilized by the ministry. We're still waiting on MIST to be able to confirm whether we can proceed with that because there were some security issues. But internally, what we have tried to do is to use the ministry's website as the mechanism by which we are able to hear the concerns, see the concerns, and then be able to prioritize getting the actual works outsourced. So I hope that answers your question. Just to go back though to something you raised in your comment regarding the Sweet Vale area. Mr. Scantlebury, I believe, said 18 months, but that's 18 months to completion because we are at the point now for the first time where we can go to tender on that roundabout. All that we are adding to it is the road. And so it is just a case of the final assessment being done to include that into the tender documents and then be able to send that out for tender for a contractor to be engaged. Obviously, when you have a road the length of what we're talking about, as well as the roundabout, the work is going to have to be done in phases. So just as we've done White Hill in phase 1 and phase 2, we have determined that even the Shop Hill area is being done in phases, Shop Hill to Content. There are times when, even though we agree that we're doing a road, there are other factors that play out in terms of where we start and the phases that we actually have to build the road under. So I know if I take St. Thomas and I mention Shop Hill, many people will say, well, you said we're doing Shop Hill to Content, why are you starting at the Content end? But it may be because, for instance, water mains have to be replaced by the Barbados Water Authority, light poles have to be moved on a particular stretch, and therefore we have to break up the work often into phases in order to be able to execute. It doesn't mean that the road will not get completed. It simply means that it has to be done that way to certainly ease the congestion as well for the public. Because in many cases, there has to be diversions that are done for the public to continue to travel along the road, for residents to be able to access the road to their various communities. So it is not as straightforward, I think, as sometimes people try to make it seem that we can just come in and fix a road within a short period of time. There is a lot of coordination, a lot of communication that has to go out. If we're doing a road like Sweet Vale, we probably will have to talk with the residents and give them some information depending on who is going to not have the proper access to get onto the road at any point in time. So it can't be, I think we can improve the way in which we shorten the timelines, but the truth of the matter is there are phases that will happen in relation to the same Sweet Vale and the roundabout works that are intended to be done.
Thank you, and I do know that I speak for the constituency I represent when I say that we'd be happy to help you with those audits, I believe, for the broken signage and so on. I believe that we do have substantial information, I won't say complete, but substantial information in the Golden Ridge Depot on broken mirrors and signposts and so on. I am receiving a message that is telling me that I did not let them speak about Newberry to St. Jude's. I will not come back in except to say that I need to be able to go back in St. George North and specifically Newberry to St. Jude's. So if you can comment on that road, please.
I'll ask the CTO to comment, but I suspect that is another one which is on the cards, because I think you have raised it previously. But as you are aware, we have done some roads last year. We have also done a few roads and plans to do some roads in your constituency this year. Those roads that you speak of, though, like St. Jude's, requires a bit more intervention. But I can ask Mr. Scantlebury perhaps to weigh in on that specific one.
What I'll say is Newberry to St. Jude's is not on our program currently. Is one that we're definitely going to have to look at now that you've brought it up.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. George North. Honourable Member for St. James North.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, first wish to credit you and your team for the efforts you have made in road rehabilitation, particularly in St. James North, over the last 3 years. Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, I know twice yesterday you said you were in this position for the last 2 years. It's 3 years. Within, the last 50 months, especially last year, St. James North got a dozen roads, which is more than we had got in all the time that I had been Member of Parliament, 12 years now exactly. And without prejudice to the Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central's tenure, when the Sign Hill area was buttressed in terms of better drainage, because that was an issue. And Mr. Chairman, roads and it has been made, and I suppose always will be a political issue. The apologists from the Democratic Labour Party often get on radio call-in programs and speak about the roads that need repairing in Barbados. The reality of the situation is that a Caribbean Development Bank study in 2017, and I believe there were other studies too, that the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister could speak to, because certainly these studies are in her ministry. But in 2017, the CDB reported that 70% of the roads, in other words, 7 out of every 10 roads in Barbados, needed repairs. So the Democratic Labour Party is not in any position morally to speak about roads that need repairing in Barbados. Again, an issue in terms of strategy. The Barbados Labour Party, I remember the Right Honourable Tom Adams had proposed that the highway from the airport to St. Peter Mile and across to be 4 lanes throughout, especially in Christchurch. The then opposition leader, now the Right Excellent Errol Barrow, said that it would be a criminal offence to build this highway in the first place, far less 4 lanes, that people can die on the highway. And it is probably regrettable that Tom Adams, the Right Honourable, did not proceed as he had a mindset to have 4 lanes on highways. We have so much traffic now. It is a problem. And then, of course, the Right Honourable Owen Arthur had proposed overheads in Warrens and in Wildy especially, and the late David Thompson criticized that too. And when the Dems came into office in 2008, reneged on the contract. We never knew how much money the taxpayers had to pay for breach of contract by the Barbados government in not putting the overheads. And again, lack of foresight and wisdom on the part of a Democratic Labour Party government when we should have had overheads. I pass the Warrens area every day and it's chaos at peak time. So really and truly the difference in strategies on road rehabilitation between the Barbados Labour Party when in office and the DLP when in office isn't clear. But the Deputy Prime Minister, of course, home drums beat first. And even though I have expressed gratitude on many occasions to you and your team.
Honourable member, I will
Yeah.
express gratitude if you get to the question.
I'm getting to the question now, sir. Get into the question, sir. That still, Rotterdam Road, which was started in December 2022, is not yet completed. Over 2 years since it was started, commendably, and that road has always been priority road for me, the #1 road to be fixed. And I will ask Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, what is the timeline for that road to be completed, as well as 1/5 of St. James North happens to be in the parish of St. Peter. And people in the St. Peter part of St. James North feel aggrieved and that they're neglected in terms of roads because there are roads in Aston Hall, Corbins Road, Reservoir Road, Graves Road, and then in Bakers Road, which is a parallel road to Rotterdam, Cemetery Lane, which is in Road View, that are still in need of repair. I understand that all roads can't be done. As I said, when the Barbados Labour Party came into office, 70% of the roads needed repairs.
Honourable member, you have asked a question.
Yes, and
Honourable
therefore,
Minister, please proceed
those-
with your response. Thank you, Honourable member.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I wanted to clarify before I go any further that of the roads that you say were in your constituency, the truth of the matter is many of those roads cut across several constituencies and benefited not only yourself, but several of the ministers as well and MPs on your borders. There are highly trafficked routes leading off of Highway 2A that connect us to the West Coast. And our main arteries in order to be able to traverse. I think the only one that we haven't been able to complete because it requires design and build is the Seaview Road, which is still in a pretty bad condition, but that needs to have design and build. So I just want to put that out there before my colleagues start to become uneasy in their seats because they hear that the Honourable Member has gotten the number of roads that he continues to boast about. But I want to allay their fears before they all start putting up their name tags to speak on the roads in their constituency. As it relates to Rockdundo, it is fair to say that Rockdundo Phase 1 has actually been completed. And Phase 2 is actually the one that has been the cause of some delay, primarily because of the soil conditions that we have met in that particular area. I believe when we started, it was supposed to be just a straightforward mill and pave, but as I have repeatedly outlined, sometimes even when you start the roads believing that it can be a mill and pave in the Scotland district, you tend to find that it is more difficult than you would have initially anticipated. And so we have had to engage in doing now some more detailed work to be able to now do a full reconstruction of that road. That is the overview. I will ask Mr. Scanterbury, the Chief Technical Officer, to perhaps just take us through the concerns relating to the road and some estimated timelines as to when it will be completed.
Good afternoon. When we started Rotterdam Road, going from the east, as Minister said, it was supposed to be all mill and pave. We assumed that the structure of the road would have been firm. However, when we got approximately 500 meters towards the west, we recognized that that was not to be so, and we had to do more work than was previously envisioned. Now, on top of that, what happened is that given that it was not mill and pave anymore, we could not go with the former mill and pave type contract. And therefore, there was a hiatus, a long hiatus inside there where nothing was really happening. We then, having a new contract now, we've gone forward we went forward to complete section 1, put in a large culvert there, and then there was a break when we recognized that the first section, there were certain areas that needed to be fixed, even while the contractor was on site. That work is something that is ongoing. We started it quite a while ago, and it is ongoing. Then we continued to section 2. Section 2, we did geotechnical surveys. We have a full design there now, and we are taking out most of the material. We're using geofabric where necessary. We're using, because of the deeper soils in certain areas, we're using various other techniques as well. It's taken longer than we had proposed because the scope of it is a lot more than we had expected at first. And that really is where we are on that. We do, however, expect to finish before the end of this financial year, because at this point in time, we are doing the very last section of work towards the west near Highway 1, and the curb work is being done as we speak. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd ask for any time frame for roads in Aston Hall to be repaired.
Honourable Member, is that a new road that or one that you were suggesting was on the list previously?
No, that they've been on the list from the time
Is this your
I
12th
became-
or this is a new one?
No, they've been on the list of repairs since I became a member of Parliament.
Okay, but I think based on your own admission, we have done quite a few across your constituency. And I think it is only reasonable that we try to spread the love across all of the other 29 constituencies. So we will assess and, as I say, prioritize as necessary.
And Mr. Chair, just a supplementary.
Supplementary? Honourable Member,
How many
you
questions?
took up your supplementary time.
But how many questions I asked, sir?
You took up your supplementary time. It's not the number of questions, it's the time.
Okay, sir.
You took up your supplementary time. I have to give your neighbor and my neighbor, the Honourable Member for St. Peter, the opportunity to post his question. He has constituents too, so do I.
I abide by your...
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. Peter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The people of St. Peter are happy that the Member of Parliament for St. James North can boast of 12 roads. We drive past on our way home or to work many of those 12 roads, and we would be happy if we could have gotten a couple of them. And I am happy with your ruling, and even though the Honourable Member is my colleague, I think we must not either be or appear to be selfish about the scarce resources and the allocation thereof where government is concerned. And I'm very serious about that. I don't intend to be parochial really with my question, and there's really essentially only one question. And the only thing I'll say before I ask the question, the only other thing I'll say before I ask the question is that the Honourable Minister spoke to the fact that some of the access roads, major access roads, were done. This is in response to the Honourable Member for St. James North. But the people of St. Peter are disappointed and have asked me to convey that. This is not a question, but this is in lead up to the question. It is giving some context to the question that they want to ask. They're very annoyed that we are now 25 days into our celebration of the gathering, with many events in Spikestown and a major artery into Spikestown used by the people of St. Peter, Eastern St. Peter, that is to say Station Hill, remains one of those bad roads in the constituency, a constituency of many bad roads, but the access into Spikestown, a town that we are working to revive, but not, I shouldn't say revive, to add even more life to, that we've had a whole number of celebratory events in the town, and that road wasn't done. Now, the question that comes out of that has to do with the work of the depots. And I am asking the question because oftentimes when I speak, those who work in the depot, and I know one or two of them are listening, say that I come into Parliament and curse them. I do what is necessary, what is required, and I administer what is deserved. So if that is what they believe, then so let it be. But my question is, in the context of what I've said before, what is the Ministry of Transport and Works doing to ensure that depots, let me phrase it a different way. I pay taxes, my family pays taxes, all of us pay taxes. Some of those dollars paid in taxes go to pay people at the Jerusalem depot. My question is, what is the ministry doing to ensure that my taxpayers' dollars that go to pay the salaries of persons, not just at Jerusalem, but at other depots as well, because I hear the complaints across the country, that those workers and their supervisors do the work they're supposed to do, and that they do it properly. I'm not gonna ask if the ministry is satisfied, because it must be dissatisfied. I just want to know what is being done to ensure that depots in this country do what they're supposed to do to maintain the road infrastructure in this country.
Thank you, Minister. I would have said in my opening that we are reorganizing a lot of the depots for exactly the reasons that you outlined. There is nobody that can be louder in voice than myself in relation to this ministry as it relates to people coming to work and doing what they are supposed to do. But I am also fair in acknowledging that there are and have been challenges over the years in relation to MTW. We didn't wake up one day and create the MTW that is there. And what we have found is that a lot of the standard operating procedures that once obtained that got things done do not now exist. Fortunately, the team acknowledges the shortcomings, and we've been working to reorganize the depots in such a way that they can actually become a lot more efficient than they are. Mr. Austin is tasked, Richard Austin, one of the Deputy Chief Technical Officers, is tasked with basically providing the output from the depots. And I will ask him to just speak not only to the challenges, but to some of the things that he's putting in place in relation to whether it's from the pothole patching or to just these simple responses to MPs and to the public generally in relation to issues that are raised from time to time.
Thank you. Richard Austin, Deputy Chief Technical Officer in charge of operations. As has been said, one of the things that we have been doing is working on reorganization of the depots, particularly from organizing it around an activities principle. In other words, we are looking at pothole patching, say, for example, and we're looking to optimize the operations of the depots with regard to that particular activity. As we've been working through since last year we started with the bridges, and with regard to the maintenance of the bridges, getting the information together that we needed to identify where the bridges were, so that we could then begin to put into place maintenance programs for each of the bridges. So one of the fundamental tasks that allows us to organize ourselves and be effective is the gathering of information. So officers are tasked with identifying the areas on the roads that are affected by, say, potholes, for example, and that information doesn't just come from the officers in the depots, but also from members of the public and other areas and MPs as well. And we are very grateful for as much information as we can, because it gives us an idea as to, begins to give us an idea of the scope of the problem. What we're hoping to do is to be able to augment our ability to capture information by getting AI-enabled software, and so that we can identify where we are experiencing defects across the country. And that will go a very far way as to giving us the overview of the problem, and be able to target the responses as they are needed. One of the things that's happening at present is that there are roads that we are currently patching that we really should be paving, but because of our inability to see the problem at scope, we are a bit inefficient in that regard. And so this is why it is absolutely important for us to reorganize ourselves as an organization, and that is what we are currently doing. They're in principle trying to give you a snapshot of what we are trying to do overall. One of the things that's been mentioned, if I may, one of the things that we mentioned is deciding what we are doing in-house, what activities we're keeping in-house, and what activities we will outsource. And that is one of the tasks that I began last year, trying to rationalize, based on our current resources, what we could become effective at and what then we needed to outsource, but that is a work in progress.
Thank you very much, Chair. I must say that I am underwhelmed at the response, because I hear some very high-level approaches to dealing with problems that are ground level. I hear about information, and we had about 2 years ago a pothole, large pothole, about 400 meters from the Jerusalem depot. That took probably about 400 days before it was addressed. So I used to ask the workers there if they used to get to work by helicopter, because they obviously weren't driving on the road, but they would be at work. I'm not necessarily working, but at work. So I end, because I don't want to get further annoyed, because I am also conscious that, you can push people, and then my constituents may end up suffering. I'm not going to take that any further. But just to say, I believe that, and the people of St. Peter also believe, that we need some very ordinary fixes to these issues. People who are employed need to work. People who destroy equipment need to be held accountable. And I leave it at that. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. Peter, for speaking on our behalf. Thank you. Honourable Minister, you have 5 minutes to wrap up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Allow me first of all to thank all honourable members who have contributed to this head. and shared not only their concerns, but also made recommendations and certainly have pointed this ministry in certain directions that I know that my officers will have taken note of, and certainly I have also taken to heart. Allow me to thank the staff as well, both in the internal ministry as well as the Transport Board and the Transport Authority, and all of the wider staff that I have been given the right responsibility to have oversight over. As I started out in this debate saying that, you know, it is not business as usual. We have been tasked with transforming and modernizing a number of our ministries. And perhaps the hardest task in transformation has been changing the mindset. Changing the mindset of the people who work in it, but also changing the mindset of the country, and certainly the expectations of our representatives, the expectations of everyone, given the level of the resources sometimes that are available to us, and knowing the challenges that we have in terms of actually enforcing to ensure that people are accountable. That said, the process has started in MTW, and I would be the first to say that having been so critical of the ministry and certainly officers, I can sit in this position today with the Honourable Parlsec and say to you that while the work has not been completed, a lot of the work has been started to change the mindset and to turn the corner in the Ministry of Transport and Works. Do we still have a lot to be done? Yes, we do, and these estimates reflect the attempts on our part in the last year to utilize the funds made available to us by the Ministry of Finance to put us in a position to do, for the first time, tremendous preparatory work that we have never been able to accomplish before. I think when we look back on this in a couple of years, you will understand from where I come from in terms of what I'm saying. This ministry has produce more in terms of the assessments and the prioritization of works than it has ever been able to accomplish. And it has taken a tremendous effort from all of the staff to be able to start the process of turning the corner. I couldn't do it without my permanent secretary, Mr. Andrew Gittins, in whose hands, obviously, the finances are firmly rooted, but also his clinical way of dealing with the staff and addressing the issues has helped to support not only myself and the Honourable Member for St. Andrew, but the entire team within the ministry. We lost tremendous value in not having the experience anymore of our now deceased Chief Technical Officer. And I would ask members to bear that in mind, because that was a blow to MTW. I started by saying it, and I'm going to end by saying it. And any ministry that loses capacity of 40 years experience of somebody at the helm who could shoot from the hip and answer every single question on every single road across Barbados and every piece of infrastructure must rebuild its efforts to be able to live up to the expectations of the general public. And that is what all of us in this ministry have started the process of doing. Will you still see potholes? You're going to see potholes, yes. Why? Because we are behind in terms of the 70% of the network that we have been now trying to repair and to rehabilitate. So we will still have to have pothole patching done while we do all of the other reconstruction and rehabilitations works. We have started to assess the bridges across the country, because no bridge assessments had been done in this ministry for many, many years. I think when I came to the ministry, it was only Pike Corner Bridge that was on the cards and in construction for the last few years. And it was certainly clear to all of us that while the technical capacity existed in the ministry, there was so much troubleshooting that the ministry was doing that it simply could not find the time to be able to get to all of the maintenance issues and the repairs that were necessary. We today can say as a ministry that we have started those assessments. We have tendered for a number of those bridges. We are in the process of seeking other consultancies to be able to have us start to turn the corner on other bridge structures. We have also put ourselves in a position where we can start to maintain and to repair a lot of the bridge structures. As it relates to the niggling issues of street lights, we continue to put in place the program for street light improvements across the country. And of course, through the reorganization of the depots, we are hoping to improve the conditions of all of the missing signage and the humps and all of the things that become a bugbear to this country. As it relates to public transportation, this government has remained committed to improving public transportation. We have ensured through these estimates that we are prepared to upgrade our terminals. One of the areas that I don't think was mentioned was the fact that for the very first time, the Seaview terminal, or what is referred to as the Princess Alice terminal, is the subject of financing for this financial year for the first time since 2011, because it's been discussed since 2011 and budgeted by previous administrations, but has never been able to see the light of day. And we have been able to dig up the designs, do the tweaks to those designs, and come this financial year, we can tender and start the process for the transformation of the Princess Alice terminal for the first time in our history. That will bring significant relief to those persons who traverse to the north of the island. It is but the start of the upgrades that have to happen to our terminals. But as we welcome the additional 30 buses by May, and then the remainder of the 31 buses by the end of this year, it is our hope that we can start to see the transformation of our public transportation system. As it relates to our PSV sector, 17 years is a long time to not have regulation. And I ask the public, quite frankly, to just be patient with us while we continue to work with the PSV sector and all of our stakeholder associations to turn this level of reckless and bad behavior around. We have put the systems in place. We will continue to sensitize and bring on board those persons who genuinely want to join with us as a ministry and transport authority to make sure that people are safe. But overall, I do believe that these estimates reflect the ability of this ministry at this time to be able to execute what is required. And I hope that we have been able, through the course of the last 2 days, to highlight many of the areas across the country which are of concern to the general public. And I certainly look forward with my team in this coming financial year to being able to execute the works program. It would be remiss of me if I did not mention the Scotland District project, which we have 17 projects ongoing presently at a total of $60 million out of the $230 million loan. That is in addition to what we are spending in this financial year of $57 million on roadworks and bridge infrastructure alone. This administration and this ministry remains committed to building out the infrastructure of this country. And I pray and hope that we are able to bring along the public in the transformation of the road infrastructure, the bridge infrastructure, and all infrastructure of this country. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Head 40 do now stand part.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you now report progress to His Honor the Speaker and ask leave to sit. Sorry.
The question is that Head 14 stand part, all honorable members. Head 40 stand part, all honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it. Honorable member for St. James Central.
Beg to move, sir, now that you report progress to His Honor the Speaker and seek leave to sit again.
The question is that I do not report progress to His Honor the Speaker and ask for leave to sit again. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Chairman has reported progress and requests leave to sit again. Honourable Member St. James Central.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to move that the House now be adjourned, suspended for until 5 p.m. this afternoon.
The question is that this honourable chamber be suspended until 5 p.m. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands suspended until 5 p.m.